Ever thought about how video actually works? I mean, film is pretty simple, right? You just focus a 2D image onto a 2D piece of film, and boom, you have a photo. But video, the moving electronic images we see every day, has a much more complex and fascinating history. It's full of incredible changes that have completely transformed how we capture and watch our world. This video is sponsored by B&H Photo, which is perfect because that's where I get most of my gear to make these videos for you. I'll tell you more about them in a bit, but right now, we're off to San Francisco. I'm meeting a guy who's an expert on old video equipment, and he's got some amazing things to show us. Richard, it's great to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Derek. Come on in.
Welcome to Lab Guy's World. Wow, this is a cool spot you've got here. Thank you. So, the biggest challenge with video is turning a two-dimensional image into a one-dimensional electrical signal. How do you even start to do that? Well, the answer actually comes from the very first fax machine, which was invented way back in 1843 by a clockmaker named Alexander Bain. His invention had a transmitter and a receiver, each with a synchronized pendulum. At the transmitter, you'd have a metal sheet with something written on it in non-conducting ink. A metal finger would scan across the sheet. When it touched the metal, it conducted electricity, sending a signal to the other end. That signal was then applied to chemically treated paper, which would darken where electricity flowed through it, creating a perfect copy of the original note. Now, Bain only ever sent static images, but he's sometimes called the real father of television because he invented scanning, the idea of moving across an image and breaking it down into lines. But for moving pictures, you need to scan much, much faster. This brings us to 1884 and a 23-year-old German student named Paul Nipkow. He patented the Nipkow disc, a large spinning disc with a spiral of holes in it. As the disc spins, the holes scan across an image. You'd shine a light through the disc onto a person, and a sensor would pick up the reflected light. This created an electrical signal that you could send to a receiver. At the other end, that signal would control the brightness of a light behind another synchronized Nipkow disc, recreating the original image. It was just barely good enough to make a viewable picture. It was even broadcast for a couple of years in Britain, America, and other countries as an experimental system. This is arguably the first ever broadcast television image, was on for a few hours a day, mainly for engineers to experiment with and try to improve the quality. And what did all that experimentation prove? It proved that this was not the way to do it. So, by 1939, mechanical TV was basically history, replaced by electric TV, specifically the cathode tree tube, or CRT. This is a glass vacuum tube with an electron gun at the back. The gun fires a beam of electrons at a screen coated with phosphor, which lights up when hit. Using magnetic fields, this beam is scanned across the screen from top to bottom, left to right. By varying the intensity of the electron beam, you could control the brightness of each spot on the screen. It's painting a picture line by line, creating the moving images we all grew up with. Voltage on a control electrode, essentially determining how many electrons would get sent out in that beam at any instant to hit the screen. So if you send out a lot of electrons, you get a bright spot. If you don't, then you get a dark spot. And in that way, you can produce a nice black and white image. If you're wondering about color TV, well, there were a number of dead ends along the path to the red, green, blue pixel system that became the standard. Like this TV with a spinning color wheel. I named the project Goldmark Eye in honor of Dr. Goldmark. The television part is a standard black and white picture tube that displayed 24 frames per second, but each frame required 6 scans. Blue, green, red, blue, green, red. It worked really well, but it wasn't backwards compatible with black and white TVs. And this is a mini trinoscope, so named for its 3 cathode ray tubes, one for each color. And their images were combined with prisms. The downside of a trinoscope monitor is that for every inch you add diagonally to your screen, the volume of the cabinet increases by, like the power of something. It's like 3.5. They get huge fast. So the ultimate solution was to have red, green, and blue phosphors for each pixel, and 3 electron guns to determine their relative brightness. Now, the number of lines those electron beams make across the screen is, in theory, 525 every 30th of a second. But this is achieved by scanning every other line each 60th of a second, so it actually takes 2 scans to make one frame. This is called interlacing. What you all notice watching this is that most of the time you're actually staring at a blank screen. The illusion of a continuous moving image is made possible by our persistence of vision. That is, We don't stop seeing something instantaneously after light stops entering our eyes. So initially I was thinking this wouldn't be too hard to film. I mean, a 30th of a second or a 60th of a second, that's not terribly fast. But then if you think about it, 262 and 1/2 lines being drawn every 60th of a second, that is 15,750 lines drawn per second. That is fast. So if you want to be able to see the lines being drawn on, you need to shoot faster than 15,000 frames per second. A lot faster, really, to be able to see this clearly. Now the actual resolution of these TVs turned out to be around 480 lines. So when you select for 800p on YouTube, that's why this is an option. And I guess it's worth pointing out that the tube in YouTube is this thing, a cathode tube. So in the time before light-sensitive chips like we all use in our cameras today, how did you actually create the image to display on a television? Well, there were many vacuum tube designs. One of the most common was the image orthicon tube, sometimes called EMI for short. In fact, that's where the name EMIs comes from. So the way it would work is you use the camera lens to focus an image onto the front of the image orthicon tube. And that was coated with a photoelectric substance, so it would release electrons in proportion to the light that hit them. Now those electrons were collimated by magnetic fields and sent straight back. So essentially you had an electron version of the image sent straight back to a target, which was a very, very thin glass plate. And of course, where there's more electrons, that creates a more negative spot on this target. From the back of the tube, you'd send forward an electron beam to scan across the target. And so these electrons, as they came in, the more negative a spot that was on the target, the more that beam would get reflected. And so that reflected beam was amplified in the tube and then used as the signal to essentially determine how bright that part of the image should be. So this is how television images were created and displayed for decades. But here's the crazy thing. There was no way to record them. I mean, the purpose of video or the purpose of electronic images was really to transmit something from one place to another. Television literally means seeing at a distance. It's not about recording for replaying later as film was. The thing that blew me away was realizing that video cameras existed for a couple decades before videotape. That's right. That was the era of live broadcasting, but this introduced some problems. For example, in North America, in the US, a lot of the TV programs were produced out in New York, and there was a coaxial cable which went across the whole of the US, and that could deliver programming to, say, Los Angeles. But it was at the wrong time. I mean, a news broadcast from New York at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock p.m. couldn't just be broadcast live at 3 o'clock or 4 p.m. on the West Coast. Just didn't make any sense. So you needed to time delay it. So how did they do it? Well, the answer was to take a film camera, a cinema camera, and point it at a television screen, and actually film the television screen. Then you would quickly develop the film and bring it back 3 hours later to broadcast it live, to scan it in and broadcast that film as though it were live. But now, when I bring it back to the TV studio and stick it into the telescene, laughs. The picture doesn't look right. The lines aren't lining up right, and besides, you're trying to sample two sets of lines back together and they don't. This became such a prevalent method of doing business for the TV networks that by 1954, the television networks, to time delay their programming, were using more film than all the film studios in Hollywood combined. This is absurd and expensive and wasteful, so a different method was really needed. And that came along in 1956 with the invention of the first workable videotape recorder. It was the size of a large desk, and it cost a fortune. It ran on this tinch magnetic tape with little video heads spinning at 14,000 RPM. We're talking as fast as a jet engine. That is the kind of technology it took before video became what we kind of know it as today. It's a method of recording and storing images, rather than a way of just transmitting vision from one place to another. But we've come a long way since then, miniaturizing the tape stand into VHS and beta, and eventually down to DV and mini DV, and now we are on to solid-state storage. And you know, I've glossed over a lot of the history here, but now we're in a situation where video is better than film. You can see that in 2012, that was the inflection point between people using film to shoot the top-grossing movies, changing over to people using digital. And what this has done for people like you and me is it's made it possible to make really good images. Music, and the question I have is, what does this do to a society? What might it do when people can share every part of their lives with video? This part of this video was sponsored by B&H Photo, literally one of my favorite stores in the world. They have all the greatest and newest camera gear, plus pro audio and lighting and computers. Basically anything you could need to make high-quality video. And every time I'm out in New York, I go and visit the store. The last time I was there, I asked them for a gimbal, because I've been seeing all these comments saying my videos were too shaky. So they recommend that this one right here, and I've really loved it. It's so smooth, I can hold it with one hand. It is pretty lightweight, and it's just been great, and I think it has really improved the quality of my videos. When I'm back here in LA, I still shop with them online, because there is no shop like that in LA, in fact. It's camera, the Sony a7R III, I'd highly recommend it. I bought it for my wife for Christmas, the Christmas before last, and it was back-ordered. But you can actually sign up through their website to get notified when it's in stock. And I did that and managed to get it in time for Christmas, so it's a really great shopping experience. The people are so knowledgeable, it's a mom-man-pop shop, it's got anything you could ever want. I highly recommend that you check out B&H Photo. I'll put a link to them in the description. And thanks to B&H for sponsoring this video.